All right, everyone. Welcome to the Mission 300 podcast. Oh, we've got a banger for you today. And I apologize. That's the first time I've used that word in this entire history of our podcast. But here's the thing. We have kind of an argument slash debate slash just good conversation that we want to bring you guys into as our listeners, all three of you. And we had this two-layered debate. We want to talk about identity on the serious end of things, but then we got sidetracked into talking about iPhone versus Android, open source versus, we'll call it not open source or closed source, proprietary, or whatever terms we end up using here. And we're trying to figure out how to square these things. So you guys might not know this, but as the hosts of this podcast, we are actually split on this issue. I've been an iPhone guy for the last many years. When I came of age and started getting into having your own phone, getting your own computer system, I was in the music industry. And so it was just Apple. That's just what we used. And some people grew up less fortunate than me and had to settle for Android. So now they're used to them and they don't want to let them go. So maybe as we get into this, you guys can just give everyone your name and where you stand on this issue and a brief defense of why.
I'm just going to be the lukewarm Christian here because I'm sitting here in this meeting on a Mac computer and I have an Android phone and I've had both. I'm happy with both. It depends on what you want me to use it for, but if it's for my job, I'll have to go with Apple for the speed of video editing and creative software that it's compatible with. If it's to annoy my friends with green bubble text, then I'll have to go with Android just to be stubborn and make other people mad. So kind of on either end of the spectrum here, probably a good mediator for this debate, if that's what we're going to call it, because I've had both, used both, kind of happy with both because I don't care in a way, but I think there's a deeper, more important meaning here that we'll get down to, and then I'll completely change my mind on which is better. So definitely stay tuned for that.
I'm going to win you over, man.
Well, Brian here being the oldest, I was selling in an electronic store the first iPhones, the first iPods. Well, it was first iPod, then it became the iPhone. For those who don't remember, the first iPhone was a cross between an iPod and an iPhone, but it didn't have phone service yet. So you had to use Wi-Fi to function your device. So I saw it all, and I didn't go with what the trend was. I wanted to find the thing that was useful to me. And so I slid over to the Samsung devices, which I have become more loyal to. But besides that, I like the idea that you can make choices and do things with your device that are not proprietary, where you have to have a special cable to do this, a special doodad to do that. And in the times with headphones, pretty much now they've all gone that way because everybody's gotten used to it. But when Bluetooth was expensive, you could not plug your phone in without buying a special adapter that cost more than the headphones to use your iPhone. So it was that kind of thing that set me apart. So I'm much more of an open source, Android-y type of guy.
David here, the youngest in the podcast crew. I am a very technical person. I love all the software that is absolutely open source and free. And if I want, I can mess and tinker with the insides of the software. I can actually download Android and make my own Android if I felt like it, program my own software. I love open source. I'm very technical. I use Windows, but there's a part of me that wants to switch to Linux, even though I know it's not better. I just love the technicality and feeling the technicals of using the open source software. And that's what Android brings to my heart.
Tommy, we need we need your stance on this. And for our listeners, we're doing this recording over Zoom, and Tommy isn't able to have his video running right now, so he's got his video turned off. And for those of you who are aware of Zoom, by default, it'll say your username. And so right now, Tommy's square says Tommy's iPhone. And so I'm really curious where he's going to land on this.
And I'm sure the sound quality will be fantastic based on his choice of devices. Go ahead, Tommy.
I absolutely love and adore Androids. They are the best machine on the market by far, made with such innovation and quality, and just really user like interface is just like the top of their, like super easy to use. The green, oh, I love green. Green messages make me, money. That's what green is. Money, money, money. We love it. Yeah, I don't exactly know what we're discussing, but I think by far superior. But granted, being said, I just really take the phone to me is a tool. It gets me from point A to point B, allows me to communicate. It could be, I've thought about just getting back to the flip phone. You never know. So
I feel like Tommy has taken the role of the 87-year-old man on this episode where he's like, it's just a phone. It doesn't matter to me. I could use my own flip phone, which I did not expect. So I'm a little caught off guard by that. But so I had this thought while we were all sharing our positions here. And Brian and David, would you guys agree, at least on this, that the iPhone interface by default, the software by default, is the most user-friendly on the market right now?
Yes.
Okay. But David, like you were saying, you're a lot more technical and able to do things with software, with tech, that most people are not able to do. So to you get much better use out of an open source system that you can mess around with. My parents would not be suited for something like that. And so I kind of feel like the different platforms, it's like, well, if you're this kind of person and you just really want something user-friendly, easy to understand, it's got very simple cloud backup and all these things, then this software and this platform might be for you. If you're this kind of person, then this software and this platform might be for you. And so it's almost like there's all these different options. And depending on who you are and what you want, you choose the one that's best for you. Would you guys kind of agree with that?
I've never used an iPhone.
Never?
Here's the thing. I don't have to think about what I missed out on when I never try the thing to begin with. So bringing this back to our personal identity, because there is a tie-in to this for all the listeners that we're going off on this. No, it's true. We all have different views, different points, different reasons why we do things. Truly, someone who understands open source or understands the how Android works, because you can look at all of the schematics, you can look at how it functions. You can actually keep viruses out, and you can keep the negative things out because you have access to it. In the case of a closed system, you have no control over that. You don't even know if you get a virus. You don't know what happens to your stuff. You don't know any of that. And there's both a pull each way, but I think we're designed that way too, even with our identity. And so I want to make the case that we're much more open source, that we get to kind of see the nuts and bolts and deal with each piece in relationship to God, versus God just puts it on you and sovereignly moving you through the process. And to some, it's way easier because I don't have to know anything if God's just sovereignly moving my identity around. But if it's open source, that means I have to dig in and start learning, how is my identity working, and your relationship with God to understanding that. So it gets rid of the lazies in our identity.
I'm wondering if you can clear this up for me a bit, and maybe at some point, most if not all metaphors break down when you're trying to compare them to the bigger topic at hand. And so that might happen, at least in my mind, at some point in this. But how would you differentiate that with what you're saying, Bryan, between the idea that if your identity is more open source, then your identity can be whatever you want it to be? As in the light of, I think that's what we see around us a lot culturally is, and that's what I was getting at with the different options for people. Well, if you like this, then you can have this. If you like this, then you can have this. And there's no right or wrong answer. There's no good or bad answer. Everything's just okay. Everything's up for grabs for whatever you want it to be. And I think that's a pitfall that we need to avoid. So how would you describe that kind of context?
Well, if we just slide over to Abraham or Abram, so he's given his identity. You're the father of many nations. Go to a new land. So now the identity is given, right? So we can say the identity is given. We can say we have a phone, correct?
Mm.
So the identity isn't like when we're talking about whether it's Android, whether it's iPhone in our fun little humor at the beginning, those are still phones. They're still devices to communicate. They all share the same direction. They use the same networks. They're not wrenches. They're not tires. So an Android will never be a tire on a car. It's not that identity. The identity is the phone. All right. But the uniqueness of each person. So you got Abram being sent out. His identity was secure. Can we agree on that? He's the father of many nations. He will be the one to do that. Now, 26 years later, when he finally can't even have children anymore, when his body physically can't do what's been asked of him to do, is when when we see the manifestation of his identity fully. True? But in that journey, he had to go look at the sand of the sea. He had his name changed. He built this relationship with God. And the more he got to know God, the more confidence that he had. And he kept growing in the stages. And in a way, he was understanding the open sourceness of his identity because he could function within it. And he could turn some things on and he could turn some things off. And sometimes it didn't work out. Now, the identity didn't change, but his functioning with the relationship with God and the relationship with himself was evolving into becoming the fullness of the end. So every character had that same process in it. Versus you're the father of many nations. It doesn't really matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you do with me. You're just going to be that. That's kind of the proprietary system. You're going to like this device and the way we set it up, and you're going to be happy about it. Versus, here's your device, this is what it does, or this is who you are. Now let's grow in relationship and understanding of how we interact. So God can bring us to the place that he saw in us from the very beginning. So we walk with him, bringing out, and we start understanding more of our thinking. We're the ones who have to cast down thoughts. We're the ones who have to renew our mind. We're the ones who have to do that. So you can't do that if you don't understand the workings of your identity, because you don't know what's true and false. So in proprietary, I don't know what's true and false inside. But in open source, I get to see what's true and false, and I can work with that. So that's my take on that thought process. So it's not, oh, I want to be this today. Oh, I want to be that today. No, the identity, the phone has to work on a network. So the network is like God. This gets a dumb analogy, but just for this, the network is like God, and you're the phone connecting to it. That's what you're designed for. But within the functionality of the uniqueness, there's thousands of different options for Android per se, all different personality types, all different everything. And there's this huge choice of all these different options for iPhone. Oh, wait, did I say that? No, there's one. So you're an iPhone, or you're a Motorola Razr, you're a Samsung Galaxy, just look at the list of all the unique fingerprints, because it's open source, but they all do the exact same thing within their identity.
I think kind of without kind of removing the analogy, is what you're saying is that God gives us a blueprint, a starting point, and a direction. And he doesn't tell us how to get to the ending point, but he gives us the blueprint to build upon and explore that direction. He doesn't just give us the entire route and direction. He kind of starts us off as this blueprint. He gives us his word and the Bible and wisdom to get from point A to point B, but there's a veil over point A to point B that's frustrating to a lot of people, but it's just the way God works. Is that kind of pretty much what you're saying without the metaphor?
Yeah, and it's not blind either, because each stage he reveals more. So the more we know him, the more of the trail is explored, because you know how he would think about it. And if I know how he's going to think about it, I know how I can think about it because I'm made in his image, right? So then at the same token, I can renew my mind and change my thinking about something to take on new thoughts so I can move forward. And that's me interacting with God and my identity, but I'm not making an identity. I'm not reshaping my identity. I'm walking out my identity. And so this brings us back to one point that probably needs to be covered. Your identity is bestowed on you. So, and we're not, when we're talking about identity, we're not necessarily talking about the biological identities, which you're born with. I'm talking about this is what you are. This is who you are. This is your name. The identifiers of who you are that shape your direction. But it's so much more of a journey of relationship between the identity and God as our Father than the fact of this is just what you are. So it's one final point. It's kind of like if you ask a Christian, who are you? Well, I'm a son, daughter of God. Well, yes, that's true, but that's just like one huge pot. But who are you within that? What is your significance within that umbrella of things? Well, then you get everybody for a loss for words. Well, I don't know. And I think part of it is back to the analogy. We've been told this big picture, but we've never been able to actually interact on the personal level and trust I can walk those things out within my identity and let God personally speak to me of how I benefit the whole in my personalness, which means I have to be able to see within myself and how my identity works and how it affects my future and who I am and remind myself of who I am.
One question I would have, because I think like I agree with everything you're saying, but I think it's in the analogy it's true and in real life it's true, is if you hand somebody open software and then the close, like we're saying, it's more user interface friendly, all this stuff. A lot of people want to choose Mac because or Apple because of the user friendliness and all these different things. Like it's just given to you on a silver platter. You don't have to do any of the thinking about the open software, all this stuff. Because like for David's mind, oh, that's awesome. He's super technical and all this different stuff. But for a lot of people, I think, and I think this isn't true in life, is they'd rather just be told how it's going to be and how to go about these different things. Like I know I do this all the time where it's like I'd rather not have to think about it. I'd rather just kind of be told how to do this so there's no like mental effort, there's no risk, all these different things. And what do you think people, I mean, anybody can give their input onto this, but like what do people need to hear? Because there is also like when kind of the joke about the green bubble, you get a green bubble text from an Android user. But there is like, if we're really going into the analogy, there is something different about you when you use an open software. You have to know more. You have to have a bigger knowledge base to use it sometimes in a way. Like some of it's already set up on phones, but as far as computers go, and I think for a lot of people, that's a turn off to that because it's like, well, I don't want to have to think about all that. I'd rather it just be all there for me, ready to go, like told who I am, all this different stuff. And I think that applies in real life as well. You see it happen all the time where people, just want to kind of pick somebody and kind of mimic them. Like they'll pick a preacher and be like, well, everything that preacher says, I'm going with that or whatever. So I don't have to, you know, try and hear God's voice on my own for my life and stuff. And I think, I don't know, I think it is like a big issue, and I can tell in my life when I'm doing it. So I'm not saying this is like everybody else doing it, right? But like, what do you think? Like, what are we missing looking for identity? Because there's like there all this stuff you're talking about so powerful, like walking out your identity with God, like this finding more of the trail. But to a lot of people, they don't hear that when you're saying that. They're hearing like that just sounds like more work and more complicated and something I can mess up. Because it sounds like you're asking me to do something not a lot of other people are doing. And so I guess like there's kind of this question when it comes to the identity thing of like, how do you even start to get to that point? Like, what's the trigger point to go, no, I need that in my life? Like, if that makes sense, kind of. Because what you're talking about is awesome, but somebody could be listening to it and be like, well, that's just like I don't even know where to start with that because why would I bother? Nobody else is doing that.
It's a great question. I think it's interesting that, uh, and I agree, we have to kind of move away from our analogy now because we all like, here's the deal. The thing you get used to using and you understand, that's what you usually stay with because we don't want to have to rethink it every single time we go in. All right. So that's a very, that really is a true statement. It's part of the reason why we like that. But let's just look at Christianity for a moment. We like it when the pastor comes and tells us what's going to be on Sunday. We want to go sit in a place with great music already prepared. We want to give as little as we have to in order to enjoy this huge event. And our identity ends up becoming more about the location that we go to or the group that we're in than the individual because none of us really want to go through the labor of knowing. And I think part of the reason we don't want to go through the labor of knowing, like you think about anything you guys have learned. So Jason, you're a great musician. Caleb, you're brilliant with film and how to put a good idea together. David is great on the engineering side. Tommy is really good with people and his interactions. And so we all have this thing that we gave ourselves to. So we're all giving ourselves to something. And why are we working hard at it? Because we can see a hope in it, and it's something that keeps pulling us into it. I would venture to say something in our communication about what God gives us in our identity has become so watered down into just participating in a mass that we don't we don't even want to go through the labor because what's the point? And I think that's the bigger thing. Like we've stripped away this relationship. We use terms that make it that we're really just chess pieces. And so give me the best chess piece as you're moving me around. And then we just kind of cope with that, but we don't step further into like the Abram, leave your home, go to a place I'm going to tell you to, and I'm going to bless you there. I mean, who does that? Who just goes? They hear a voice and they just go. But it's in that whole journey because he knew there was something, and he said against hope, he believed in hope. And then he also said that he believed in the God who raises the dead and causes those things that don't exist as though they do. So he creates out of nothing, he raises the dead, and so this is who Abraham got to know as God the Father. Now when things come along, he knows what there's this energy to go learn more and to become part of that.
I want to ask some questions because when I first heard the identity thing, because this is one of my dad's favorite topics, in my mind, my identity is I'm a child of God. And that's kind of the depth of the identity statement for me. And then, sure, maybe there's more to it. Maybe it's like, okay, well, my identity is in God, and then my identity is also the Bible. But in my mind, my identity is the same as the Christian over there, his identity. His identity is the same as the Christian over there, their identity. And okay, maybe you can take spiritual gifts or something. Okay, my identity is in the body of Christ is the eyes, or his identity is the hands or something. And that was the extent of identity in my mind. And I didn't know anything else what that looked like besides maybe those verses in Corinthians about how the church is a body. So if you wouldn't mind, could you give some examples of, uh, for example, Jamie Winship that, or in your life, or what your identity is, or things like this to give examples? Because I think what you say is there's a part of your identity that isn't the same as anyone else's identity. Your identity is different than and something unique. Your God-given identity is something unique that isn't in everybody. So could you give some examples of what that looks like?
Yeah, so you have different personalities. So you have think about every character in the Bible. Well, maybe you're not going to sit there and think about everyone right now. Every character had a completely different personality, a, not a different interaction with God, but it's almost like, you could take a Gideon says Gideon really got to know God's left hand, like that side of him, his left side. Abram really got to know the right side of God. I don't mean which one's right or wrong. Let's do back, front, whatever. We know an aspect. Caleb, you know an aspect of your parents different than your sisters know. It's all the same person, but their interaction because of their personality is different. So to repeat characters, so you have Abram had one interaction with God. He discovered something about God. He walked it out, became a man of righteousness. You have Gideon, you have Samson, you have Jephthah, you have King David, you have Daniel, you have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You have all these different characters, and then you could get in the New Testament. Peter and John were completely different people, yet they work side by side. Completely different people. John could see into the spirit realm. He had whole different visionary of who God was, not of who God was, not a different God, but aspects because of his personality that were critical. Peter had discovered a different aspect because of his identity and his calling. Peter's the guy that's speaking in front of the people. Peter's the guy they're laying people out in front of him just so his shadow would cross over him and they would get raised out of their sickness. This is Peter. John wasn't that vocal, yet his writings are amazing and they take us into a different realm. So when I say the uniqueness, when we just sit on this phone call, every one of us has this, whether it's kind of an engineering bent or a creative side in the sense of making movies or music and speaking, or maybe it's just more solid on the business side of connecting people and how that works. Look at this whole call of people. We're all so different. We're so different. We all think differently. Now, we're not thinking differently like we're thinking opposite of each other. But the thing that's important to our frame is so different than each other person's frame. And so if you knew God was involved in that frame, in that personal side, all of a sudden there'd be an eagerness to see what he could do with you. Now, as he begins speaking to you, this is what you are. This is what you are within the body. You now can get your mind off of you. You can put your mind onto him, and your identity starts benefiting other people around you. I think one of the worst things is when we don't help people find their unique identity. They spend all their time on trying to find it anyway. We're always trying to find it. We just don't go to God over it because it's already blanketed. There's nothing special about you. There's nothing unique about you. And we just know that's not true. Just look around at creation. Everything is unique. every snowflake, every animal, same class, but they're all different personalities. Take a bunch of dogs, even of the same breed, they're all just different. They all just have a different way of handling things. And so that's our uniqueness. But we don't know how to necessarily tap into that because the main group has said you're just sons and daughters of God. And they'll say you're unique, you have a purpose, you have a calling. It's so general. It's kind of like if I get an iPhone and want to go do music on garage bands or whatever, but I'm not a musician, it's not going to benefit me. In fact, I won't even give myself very much time into it because it just doesn't fit my frame of reference. But Jason, you can. I'm shocked at how good of music you create on that little iPhone 6-7 years ago that you were using. But you saw it and you could interact with it. And so to David's question, the unique side of things is every character. The reason that the Bible is filled with stories about people is because we are all unique characters. We're, in a sense, open source. We're an open source, not changing. Keep in mind, open source doesn't mean the source changes. It just means we can understand the source so we know how to interact with it, and we can add proper things that fit our uniqueness within that. All right. So open doesn't mean today I'm this, tomorrow I'm something different. No, that doesn't change. But proprietary means I'm going to shut all that down, that you're just a big general blob. And I'll dictate. And we'll surrender to that. I mean, communism did it for years. We'll surrender to it, that we don't have to actually go and walk this thing out. And the truth is, you have to go learn it. You have to learn your God as a father, not know about him, not read more books about him, know him. You need to discover the words that were spoken over us of who we actually are in him, our uniqueness in him, and then we can slowly start walking it out. And I saw this in David's life, the wrestle back and forth of, okay, I want to do something for God, but I really like engineering, and this kind of back and forth. And I think that's settled. Like he's all God, all quote unquote ministry, whatever you define that as, in his gifting of engineering. And that becomes a powerful thing. Now, guess what? His relationship with God increases. But if I'm spiritual, if I'm in this group over here, but over here, these aren't spiritual things, I won't look for God in those, and I will look for another source or another software to make me different over here. But then I can, when I say over here, I'll look for something in my everyday life because God doesn't really function in that. And we don't know what to give ourselves to. So the thing is, we start disconnecting from God, trying to figure it out on our own. And where is our whole focus become? Ourselves. So actually, the most selfish people are the ones that don't understand their uniqueness in God. Because the more you understand your uniqueness in God, you don't have to think about yourself because you're free just to operate within your identity and your relationship with him. And all of a sudden you think about other people. And that is at the essence of the fruit of the Holy Spirit. All the fruit is the eyes aren't on you, it's on the people around you, right? Because the tree doesn't eat its own fruit. The people around eat the fruit. So that's where I'm almost going to go, that it's been a disservice to blanketing our identity as just one big thing versus the uniqueness within our identity. And this is why, and Jason and I have talked about this forever, this is why the Old Testament characters get so ripped apart, because we want them in a box that we can understand that is no different than us. And we see this when the children of Israel wanted to go into send the spies into the promised land. And in Numbers, Caleb says, we surely can overcome. Now, keep in mind, they're slaves for 400 years. They've never been to war. They don't know how to carry a sword. They don't know how to do any of this stuff. Yet God says, you're going to go overcome. And then Caleb says, we can surely overcome. The other 10 spies say, no, there's giants in the land, that we can't win. We're just grass, and it says we're grasshoppers in our own sight. So you see, they blanketed an identity. One person knew who he was. The rest thought they were something different as a group, and it kept them out of the promised land. And so I think the uniqueness is so critical in this journey. And by the way, if we have a good relationship with God and we're just in a general group, how does that work? Seems to me we have more relationship with the organizations and entities we're in than we are with God himself.
I was thinking about that. This was years ago. I think we very quickly forget what we've been given when it comes to identity, and just to stick with our metaphor with the phone. So I remember the first time I got an iPhone with GarageBand on it, being so geeked out of what I could do with it. And most people, I was listening to a podcast at the time, and the guy was talking about how we have no idea what we can accomplish with these devices that we have now. Everyone uses them to talk, text, and surf the web and be on social media. And you don't realize that you have a device that can do anything. You can start a business from your phone. You can write songs from your phone. You can edit movies and film things on your phone. You can do all this stuff from this phone. And we get excited about that for 20 seconds. And then it just becomes, oh, yeah, well, yeah, I can do a lot of stuff. And we use it for nothing but doom scrolling and whatever. And I think we've done that because there is so much possibility. Like there's the born again aspect. You realize what you've been given, and then we settle into this, okay, I'm a Christian. And we forget that there is so much that you can walk in as a believer with the identity you've been given. And there are things, I think it's not a stretch to say that there are customizable things. There are things in, aspects of our identity that people use more. And the New Testament talks about this. Like there's different gifts that the Spirit gives. There's different roles, there's different functions, but beyond that, there's different life paths and different careers that people take and use those gifts in. And it doesn't make it less a phone or more of a phone. It just means that's what this is being used for. And we've kind of taken the adventure out of it. I'll give one example of this that I guess kind of makes people feel weird at times. The Bible talks about and describes dragons. And you think about that and you either write it off as a weird mythological fairy tale or some nonsense. But I think that kind of proves my point of the problem there. We've taken amazing, adventurous, epic things of creation itself and watered them down and written them off to the point we don't even think about them anymore. We've taken amazing aspects of identity and watered it down to, well, I'm just a child of God like everybody else. And then we get lost.
Yeah, I think another thing that's relevant to this is like for the past month, I've been in a new town and everything and trying to convince myself to go to church. And I know it sounds kind of funny, like convincing yourself to go to church, but just going by myself in kind of a way that I've never done before because it's either been with like family or friends and different stuff like that. And kind of my thought process, I started to realize when I was giving myself excuses for why not to go and not to talk to people and stuff was because I kept on kind of telling myself, well, I don't have anything to offer anybody when it comes to going to church because like I know how church works. Like I'm a Christian. It's fine. Like they're probably good without me there and everything. And I think that's kind of like what we're talking about when it comes to identity, we kind of get in this spot where it's like, well, we don't have anything to offer, or I don't have anything to offer because like, I just have like my life. And I think that's like what you're saying, Brian, like there's more to identity than what we have in the like confines of what we've seen examples of. And it kind of came to this point this past weekend where it was like, okay, well, I do have something to offer, whether that's like friendship with somebody there and I want to make friends and stuff, but it would be kind of my last thought before I like went into church was like it would be a shame for me to go a year living in this town and not offer anybody what I have. And I think it's kind of like the parable of the talents. Like it's like God gives these different talents, or the king gives the talents or the money or whatever to the different servants, and then he comes back a year later and he's like, "What did you do with it?" And I'm butchering the parable, but basically the one who hid them away and did nothing, that was like the incorrect response to be giving these talents. And I think it's like God has placed in each person such a unique identity that we all have something to offer and sacrifice, but we kind of simple it down because we think it's not like what we've seen people around us do. Like it's not like the example of that. I don't have the talent like that missionary I read about or this preacher on the stage. Like I'm terrible at public speaking. So, and I like I get nervous talking to new people, so I don't have anything to offer people because, and it turns into this like cyclical looking inward, and in reality we're forgetting like God being with us and all the unique characters he's put within us, with characteristics that he's put within us, and we kind of like, or I know I do, like I forget it so easily because I get caught up in my own little world. And so I think it's a good reminder, like what you're saying, Brian, like there, it's almost like we want all these different definitions to help us. We want this like user interface laid out for us that's like we don't have to do anything because that would be too much work. But I think like I like for me it really helped for me to go to church this weekend because I was like, okay, it's a process and it would be a shame if I go a year without offering to anything to anybody. Like, like in Romans where it says offer up your body as a living sacrifice, maybe that's part of it, of like offering what God has given you to other people and back to God because he has given you unique characteristics, and we just get so caught up at looking at everybody else's identity that we can't even think about our own. Like, okay, what has God given me that I can give to other people? And then you want to become better at that because that's like a talent you have or a unique characteristic. And I think we just get too caught up, or I know I do, get too caught up in like looking at what other people have going on and kind of getting all bummed out, forgetting everything that God has given me and then not doing anything with it anyways. And it's a shame that it's like that. And I think I just have to remind myself of the things that God has given me because I think it's, that's where you want to give it back to God and give it to other people because there's a reason God gave it to you and put you on this earth. That's where like our identity starts going into purpose and meaning of life because it moves you forward to these different things if you truly live it out and everything. So definitely a good reminder. I mean, even if it just is to get me to go to church this weekend or whatever.
I have an example for you, David, too, because you asked for specific examples. And there's in the last like year and a half, this has kind of been a new thing ish for me. Like the last year and a half, I've really been wanting to see people that want to build for the future in our church and in our kind of community here. And I wanted to see them come together. And that sounds like a big cliche, but I guess the picture I had of it was we have a small church, been around for a long time, and it's been consistent. It's small, but it's been consistent. It's been faithful for many years. But there is something I wanted to see built of youth, of I don't mean kids, like young families that are building for the future, that want to see stuff that lasts beyond our time and our kids' time and our grandkids' time. And I had no idea what to do with that. It was just this idea, and it's kind of like, hey, I wonder if I want to see this thing. I want to be able to use this identity for this thing. And we have half a dozen new young families that have started coming since that time because there's something going around where it's, there's one family went to a much bigger church. It was not quite a mega church, but drastically larger than ours. A lot of exciting worship, lights, video, smog machines, dynamic speaking, all that stuff. And they're like, we want something different. There's another family where it's like, my family's gone to this other church for generations, and it will make my grandparents very angry and cause some family troubles if we don't go there. But there's nothing for us there, and there's something of life here. And so we want to start building something here. And so that hasn't been part of my function or my identity or my pursuit very much in the past, but it's something new that's just come up. And the whole thing it made me realize is you can just do things. Like, you don't have to ask for permission. You can just do stuff and see what grows. Like, you have this open source phone, you can just do stuff with it, and you don't have to ask someone's permission. You can just make stuff happen.
In all this, there's an interesting dynamic of helping create an environment that you walking in your true identity in God, in Jesus, what he provided for, is the most spiritual thing you can ever do. So whether the application at times is in business, or the application is in engineering, or the application is in video making, or the application is in pastoring, managing a business, whatever, those are applications. So those aren't your identities, but those are outflows of your identities. And when you do those from your identity, it's the most spiritual thing that you can do. And we don't celebrate that. And honestly, the gifts to the body of Christ. So keep in mind, if someone's called to be a pastor, an apostle, or whatever, you're actually a gift to the body. You're not the body's a gift to you. You're a gift to the body, to edify, build them up, to go do the work of the ministry. And so what's the work of the ministry? It's being out there. It's functioning fully in your identity. And then people see you and say, I want that. I want what you have there. How does that ever happen if it's not out in everyday life? And we don't make being in everyday life a spiritual event. And when I say spiritual, I don't mean foofy spiritual. I mean the essence of what you are. Now, when you go back to church, you're filled up so you can go be that, but we don't celebrate the outside. We celebrate the conference on the inside. And so it gets very confusing. And in order to become bigger at the conference on the inside, I have to do more things to make it more proprietary, more unique, more about the group than about the individual that's going to be going out. And I think, Jason, I know your heart in that is very similar, even what you're talking about with small families. We want to come and gather. So this isn't against coming and gathering, but the purpose of coming to gather is so that you can be refreshed, strengthened, your identity is called out, your false identities that you're hanging on to are stripped away, and you step back into the environments that is part of your occupation, part of your what you've chosen to do in your identity. And that is where the difference is made. That's where the difference is made. That's why you can have a Gideon. Like, we don't talk about just, we talk about the heroes of faith, but it actually doesn't call them heroes of faith. We've identified a big group of people to heroes of faith, but it actually says, time wouldn't help me tell. And he starts, the writer of Hebrews names each one of these individuals. Think about that for a moment. He's naming the individuals, not the big heroes. We've labeled that. And so I just think it's a very important thing that each one of, by the way, there was not one pastor, quote unquote, that we would see today that did any fantastic thing in the Old Testament. There's really very few priests that are even mentioned that did anything that is different. However, they had such a key role when they did it properly to edify the workers. So you think about, you have a king, and they always had a prophet come and speak to him. So if the king did right, what was the prophet's role? To keep him on track. What was the priest's role? Is to give him guidance and to in the answering of prayer. But now we don't need that because we have it in the Holy Spirit, but they didn't. And so what did they navigate? So that the king could go be a king, so that Daniel could go be Daniel, so that, you guys catch the picture. They did things so that the identity could go affect the world. So it's all individual. And it is the most sacred thing to live from your identity in a world that doesn't necessarily accept it. And we should be the biggest empowerment of that in the body of Christ so they could function in the world around them. That's how people are one. And I think it's interesting. People think that knowing Jesus is just about sharing a message. Jesus actually said, they'll know you because I will be in you, you will be in me, we will become one, and they will know the Father sent me. So how do people know? When we walk in our identity in him. That's how people know. Yes, we open our mouth and we share, but the attraction is that piece.
I think it's ironic that we look at things like engineering as not as much a part of the body. You look at the human body and tell me engineering isn't the most crucial thing to the human body. You don't think that was engineered. You look at how joints fit together. You don't think manufacturing is a body thing. Do you understand how the body manufactures things to replace damaged tissue and muscle? It's an There's so much more incredible things that we've written off as not as Christian when they are literally the fabric of creation.
I want to make sure this podcast today closes on that note. The uniqueness is the most spiritual thing you can do with God. And when you get it, you'll want to contribute to the rest of the body. You'll be for the rest of the body. You'll want to make the rest of the body work. That's the element of this that people don't quite understand. Some reason we say, oh, if you become unique and free in your own identity, everybody will just be a bunch of independents running around. The truth is, when they're truly free, they're actually wanting to build the body.
One final thought that has been helpful to me is like when you are starting the process of like who am I or what's my identity. I think for the longest time I was like trying to come up with a title for myself. Like, oh, am I like a storyteller? No, because I don't really like that's not, oh, okay, I'm like a creative. Yeah, that's it. And it was like, no, well, there's like this other aspect. Like I'm not always creative. Like I still like math and stuff, or okay, like I really value truth. So I'm like a truth seeker. And I was constantly like always trying to come up with like, what's my identity's title? Like, because I want to be able to tell people, like when somebody says I'm a pastor, I want to be able to do that. But like, I understand this aspect of like identity's not within the normal confines. But I think like if you're truly pursuing truth and identity in God, it's so constantly evolving and changing. I think there are like we can name all these different characteristics of identity, but I would say don't get too caught up. Like this is advice for myself. Is like don't get too caught up in trying to pick a title or trying to find something where you can fit within a title of something like musician or engineer or something because there's so many different characteristics that build up who you are that to like put it in one single title like can hurt you long term because you're like, well, I want to do this differently, but that doesn't really line up with what I've done in the past. So I want to stay on this track. Like you can create your own identity more than like what God's trying to bring you on. And I do that to myself. So that's just like a thought that I always have is like I don't have to explain my identity to anybody as long as I'm like confident in it with God and understand there's all these different characteristics. So I can describe it to you, but I have to be careful for myself not to try and put a title so that way I can feel like what I'm doing is justified to other people. So that's like a tip that I've kind of learned over the years because then I've always been like confused like well, I kind of don't know what I am if I can't put it into like a singular title because other people have that going for them or whatever. So I think that's a big thing is don't worry about like right now if you're starting on this thing of identity trying to figure out, oh, what is my identity? What title can I throw on so I can go do all these things and like immediately fit into what I think my identity should be based on the title. I would say it's so much more deep and complicated and complex and beautiful that it doesn't need to be. We don't need to simplify it for ourselves, even though it's really tempting. I mean, that's what I want to do all the time. So,
Yeah, that's really good. I like that.
At one point, that really stands out to me, just looking in the history of my life, is when I tried to be an identity to fit to something, it always caused disruption in my life. But when I just was was, what I really am, things changed. That's all my stories of my relationship with God and the crazy adventures that were impossible to come about all came from that navigation with the identity. And it didn't fit any mainstream thing. It was a journey. And that made it more exciting to want to know more. And it's hard. It is hard, but it's a different kind of hard. It's a hard that keeps drawing you into more of it because it's, wow, God is talking to me. God is interacting with me. God is doing this. And then you learn to let go. You know, one of the big things is letting go of the lies about your identity. Like, we believe lies. Oh, I'm just a grasshopper. It's a bigger problem than me. That's a lie. So we believe lies to actually mask the identity we're supposed to be. And it is so satanic. And if you really look at it, Satan's only after one thing. If I can keep you from discovering who you really are, I can control you. Isn't that what slavery is? I'm going to control who you are and change your identity so I can have power over you. And Jesus said, I came for freedom's sake to set you free. We were created to be free, and free means to walk in your identity. Free doesn't mean do whatever you want. It's walking in your identity, which actually becomes more challenging, harder, but we crave it. And it's what we're really craving. That's the meaning of open source.
It's a good place to end it. I'll just say I did not see our metaphor going this direction. I really thought my iPhone side was going to come out on top, but I feel like I was pretty wrong. But it's just a metaphor. Anyways, hope you guys got some out of this conversation. We appreciate you tuning in. Till next time, keep the faith and stay in the fight.